Hello and welcome to my present. Today, for this episode of Starter Base Architecture, we're going to be taking a look at ancient Greek architecture and how we can use columns to give our builds a sense of support and also raise a person's eye level, similar to what we did with gradients in the last episode. With that, we're going to get into a couple of column designs here. When building columns, especially at this small scale, the most common color palette you're going to see is going to be based on quartz and specifically based on this quartz pillar block. A lot of the traditional Greek pillars will have these kind of riveted designs as you go around the circle of the column, and so this quartz pillar block emulates that very well. Now, there are three different types of Greek pillars, which I'll put up on screen here now as a little diagram. We're going to be mostly focusing on this one here on the left, the Greek Doric column. The Greek Corinthian column is better at larger scales because it requires a lot of ornamentation on both the top and bottom, which we can't achieve as well at these smaller scales. The Greek Ionic is similar. We can get kind of the feel of it with a column I'll be showing later, but the simplest column that we're going to be building most of today is the Greek Doric column, as it really kind of emphasizes how we will build up and out to a kind of support on our column, which will help raise the eye level of our viewer in our build. So there's a lot of different ways to build that type of column. I found a couple using stairs and slabs, which you may have personal preferences for one or the other. I think a lot of the time it will depend on the feeling of your build and your columns as a whole. So the first one I want to show is one based entirely on stairs, which is simply ringing the pillar with stairs all the way around to build this column. Now, this one is fairly bulky, but it does give that true sense of support for your column. If you're building a taller build, this may be the way to go. However, you will need to be separating your columns apart, and at that point you may want to build a wider pillar for your column, maybe more like 4x4, to help give more of a sense of support for a larger build. Now, another design we can do with just stairs for a column is placing them just on the four faces of the block. This is a much simpler and thinner design, which allows you to place columns slightly closer together without it feeling obstructed and a little bit overwhelming. However, seeing the blank faces of these stairs may not be to everyone's taste. Another design we can do is with just slabs, which I prefer to do just slabs on the faces of the block. You may be tempted to place slabs in the corners of the block as well, and this is not a bad column design. However, I feel that it doesn't kind of give the sense of support all the way that you're looking for, especially if you're going to be adding columns to your build. I think that the one with slabs, while definitely the most minimalist of our designs, still gives that kind of feel of supporting outward from our column. Finally, we're getting to my favorite design of column for especially the supports, which is stairs on all four faces and then slabs in the corners to break up the whole kind of stair face. This kind of gives you a good in-between between the minimalist style of this column and the kind of maximal full extension of this column over here. So for our builds today, this is the column I'm going to be using, just because, especially at the scale I'm going to be building and the style that we're going for, this is the one that I find works best. Now, just because quartz is the most common color to use does not mean it is the only one. For example, here we have a kind of red palette, similar to the actual Parthenon in Greece, which has that slightly pinkish tint. Now, this is a lot more red and darker with a lot less of the white tones, but it is as close as I could get, and that's partially why we won't be using this design for our builds today, because I couldn't get exactly the pink tones that I was looking for if I were to build a replica of the Parthenon as our starter base. Now, this one does not have the kind of texturing that you have with this block. However, I think especially if you wanted to change this with a gradient for a much taller column, can absolutely lead to that more guiding upward feel of the column, which could be great, especially for Roman builds, which we will get into in a later episode. Moving on, we now have some more kind of out there color palettes, and for those sensitive to sounds, this is a terrible block. But especially in like water themed builds, like say if you were building in a Greek style for an Atlantis type build, the warp stem in Prismarine serves as an awesome way of getting the kind of vertical texture in a column, which helps to serve to bring the eye upward as well, and a very nice kind of textured support with this kind of stylized Prismarine, which can lead into a really awesome and cool building style. Another way to do this if you don't like the Prismarine styles is to go in more of a steampunk direction with copper blocks, and that will also work well with Prismarine and the warped blocks. Next up, we're moving to another one of my favorite designs with the orange color palette, which has just a ton of options if you're wanting to build something orange. This one still has that kind of vertical texturing, which helps to draw the eye upward. However, for this one, we are going to be building more in the Greek Ionic column by adding a base using trapdoors. Now, especially at this smaller scale, the trapdoors help serve as a really good kind of foundation layer without drawing the eye too far away from a very small column. And then by also having a kind of smaller upper pillar, we really complete that Greek Ionic style. If I were to use this in a build, this one would probably be much taller and would kind of help lend itself to kind of an airy feel, maybe in a steampunk build where you're looking for those kind of grand vaulted ceilings for a steampunk type of aesthetic. Finally, we're getting into the one I'll be using for the rest of this video, which is based on a kind of blue tint using clay and diorite, which I know a lot of people have very strong feelings about diorite, but hopefully I can at least show that there are some good use cases for it. We'll be doing the Greek Doric columns for this, using this similar style. Now, this build for our main build is going to be based on the Parthenon. However, as I said, I couldn't find the kind of very hint of pink tones that I was looking for. So we're going to be going with a hint of blue instead, to still kind of get that hint of another color with a base of white. And for that purpose, I think that this will serve as a really awesome column for our build. With that, we've got our full color palette here, which we will grab and then hop into a time lapse in this space right here. So with that, let's hop right into it. Starting off with this build, we're deviating away from the clay outline that we did to go more by the 4:9 ratio that was used in the actual Parthenon. Now that is slightly hindered by my inability to count. Here you see me double checking, but we end up getting that to work, and now we end up building the plinth. We're going to just be using our gradient from the last one for this plinth design that we're going to build our Parthenon adjacent building on top of. So here we're going to be using a gradient just of stone and andesite, which works as a really good kind of very simple gradient to help draw the eye upward on a very kind of small structure in the grand scheme of things, being the point of our build here. Now, we are going to be going with mostly that blue-gray design based on those columns I showed earlier. Partially because there's not enough of the light pink blocks that show the Parthenon as it is today. And also, at this small of a scale, it's a lot better sometimes to go with those more simple color palettes. So even though the Parthenon in its originality was very brightly painted in vibrant reds and yellows and blues, going with the more gray style can help us get the tone of ancient Greece as we would see it today. We're building up our Doric columns here. The Parthenon, however, used a combination of Doric and Ionic columns, which is extra interesting because the Doric and Ionic styles are actually architectural styles on their own that we simply are taking the columns from. So while we say ancient Greek architecture, really we mean the combination of the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian styles, which were often melded together in Greek architecture. For example, the Parthenon that we're basing this build off of used a ton of Ionic and Doric styles melded together seamlessly to create a truly incredible build. As I'm putting this in here and I'm trying to place that next stair, I realize that that will not work how I want it to. So I end up tearing this all out and going back. And that's okay, especially if you're working creative. Having the ability to just tear something out if it's not working and try again is perfectly fine. I really liked building in this ancient Greek style because a lot of architectural styles that you'll see in real life are modeled in some way off of the Greek architectural style. You can see a lot of these kind of design elements from ancient Greece in a lot of different places. I'm being very careful here to say that this is a Parthenon-inspired build, as I'm taking a lot of liberties with the Parthenon design to highlight the kind of ideal of ancient Greek architecture that I have in my head through cultural osmosis, where Greek architecture has been referenced time and time again. For example, in this roof that I have enclosed, for the actual Parthenon, there would have been a rectangle of light and open air that would allow light to shine on the statue of Athena located on the central area of this temple. If you're looking for inspirations to how to decorate the interior of this build, that could certainly be an inspiration, some sort of statue. I end up building one of those in kind of a more jest style, something lighter, because that is the story that I wanted to tell. A lot of the interior decorations that you're going to do are going to depend on the story that you want to tell with the build. Ancient Greek architecture was prevalent from about 850 BCE to about 600 CE. It has a lot of notable architects who have survived due to the amount of great works of writing that have survived from this culture. One of my favorites is Hippodamus of Miletus, who is often considered as the father of urban planning. He is often referred to as the originator of the cities with grid system and parallel streets and central public spaces, which I find truly fascinating and interesting that so long ago these designs, which we're finding to be extremely effective today, were already being implemented. And so there we have our Parthenon fully built. Um, as I mentioned in the time lapse, these things normally have a statue inside. So I have just substituted in my favorite statue. So we got our little foxy boy here taking up the kind of central part of this. Let me know in the comments if you want a tutorial of this guy. And then down here we have built kind of our starter base essentials. This would turn into a full redstone sorting system, similar to the silo kind of style, so that these would line up. And there we have our full starter base right here. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit about ancient Greece. And with that, I will catch you in the next one. That's not it.